Hi, guys. Welcome back to YouTube Sunday School at Centenary United Methodist Church. It's so good to see you all again. Just a reminder, on October the 28th, we're going to have our tabletop trick-or-treat time. Hope you'll all join us. We're going to keep it socially distanced. There'll be tables outside, and they will be 6 feet apart, and on the ends of all the decorated tables will be bags of candy for you to come by and pick up. We'll make sure that you go through as family so that you're not, kind of all ganged up in there together. And we will keep you as safe as we can. Hope to see you then so we can at least, speak and wave and maybe visit a little bit. But we look forward to that evening. And please bring some friends with you too. Today's story is about Moses. Moses was probably one of the most important characters in the Old Testament, I think. Moses was in Egypt for a reason that our story last week talked about. Joseph had brought all of his family into Egypt to protect them from the famine. And they lived there. They didn't go back home. And as long as Joseph was alive, they were protected. They flourished. They grew in numbers. And so, again, they were in good stead as long as Joseph was alive. But when Joseph died and new pharaohs came up, they didn't think as kindly about the Egyptians as everybody else did. About the Israelites as everybody else did. The Egyptians actually were afraid of them and thought that they might take over their country. So they first put them to work as slave labor, building the pyramids, and thinking maybe that would discourage them or not as many would be born, and that didn't work. And so Pharaoh decided that he would put out a decree that said that the male children were to be killed. That didn't work either. So Pharaoh was kind of in a tough spot with trying to control that population. But the people, the Israelites, were very, very, very sad about their plight, that they had turned out to be slaves, and they cried out to God to save them. And it was during this time that Moses was born. And today we're going to see the story that talks about Moses' birth, and we're going to look at what he then does as he grows older, and the important things that Moses does for the people of God. It is a very, very, very important story as far as the Bible is concerned, as far as helping us to look toward Jesus. God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. He was an Old Testament figure that sat on the mountaintop and listened to God every day. So Moses was a very, very, very important person in the Old Testament. So let's begin watching our video today.
Joseph and his brothers grew old and died. But their children's children stayed on in Egypt, where they became a very large family. Later on, a new king began to rule. But this Pharaoh didn't remember Joseph, and he didn't like God's people. He made them into his slaves and beat them and made them work harder and harder. God's people cried out to God to rescue them, and God heard them. He remembered his promise to Abraham. He would look after his people. He would find a way to set them free. One day, Moses was looking after sheep when something caught his eye. A bush was behaving very oddly. It was flickering with flames, but its leaves weren't burning up. He took a closer look. "Moses!" boomed a big voice. Moses leapt back. But the bush was talking to him. "I have heard my people's cries," God said. "I have seen their tears. So I have come down to rescue them. Go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go free." Moses was afraid, but God said, I will be with you." So Moses went to Pharaoh. "Pharaoh," Moses began. "God says—" "God," said Pharaoh. "Never heard of him." Moses kept going. "God says, let his people go free." "Why should I?" Pharaoh said. "Don't want to, won't." So he didn't. So God gave Pharaoh 10 warnings called plagues. First, God turned the river Nile into blood. No one could drink the water. But still Pharaoh would not let them go. So God made frogs come hopping and leaping and jumping. In your bed frogs, in your hair frogs, in your soup frogs, all over everywhere frogs. "Make them go away," Pharaoh screamed. "Then your people can go." So God took the frogs away. But Pharaoh changed his mind. "You can't go," he said. Then God sent zillions of gnats. But still Pharaoh said no. So then God sent swarms of flies, flies buzzing in your eyes, flies. And after that, sickness and horrible boils and huge hailstones and a storm of locusts. Then darkness when it should have been day, until it seemed that the whole world, creation, everything was coming undone, falling back into darkness and emptiness and nothingness. But each time Pharaoh said, "Make it stop and then I'll let them go." And each time when God made it stop, Pharaoh changed his mind and said, "Actually, no, you can't go." Well, finally, Moses warned Pharaoh, "Obey God, or he will have to send the worst thing of all." And Pharaoh just laughed. So God said, "The oldest boy in each family of Egypt must die, but my people will be safe." God told his people to take their best lamb, to kill it, and to put some of its blood on their front doors. "When God passes over your house," Moses explained, "God will see the blood and know that the lamb died instead of you." That night, it was just as God had said. Suddenly, piercing the darkness, echoing down the corridors of the palace, came a blood-curdling scream. Pharaoh's oldest son had died. At last, Pharaoh did what God said. "Get out!" Pharaoh shouted. "Just go!" And so, that very night, Moses and God's people fled out of Egypt and out of slavery. They were free at last. God's people would always remember this great rescue and call it Passover. But an even greater rescue was coming. Many years later, God was going to do it again. He was going to come down once more to rescue his people. But this time, God was going to set them free forever and ever.
So, what a great story. And there's more to come. We'll do part 2 next week. So, Moses, let's talk a little bit about how Moses ended up being the shepherd out there. Moses was born, and they took Moses and they put him in a basket. And when they put him in that basket, he was floated down the Nile, and he was found by by Pharaoh's daughter, and so he was raised in the palace. But he remembered all this time because his mother came to the palace to take care of him because Pharaoh's daughter needed somebody to take care of him. But he was taught God at a very small age, at a very early age, and then he was raised as a prince in the palace. One day, as a young man, he was out and he saw them mistreating the Israelites. They were, pushing the stone to build the pyramids, and the Egyptians were whipping the Israelites. And Moses just couldn't stand looking at it anymore. So he went and pulled the guy away from whipping. And in the tumble with that, he ended up killing the guy. And he knew that because he had done that, that the Pharaoh wouldn't protect him, that he would have him killed. So Moses ran. And so Moses was living out in the desert with a family out there, and he was watching over sheep. So that's how Moses ended up out there. And that's where God found him, and that's where God spoke to him in the burning bush. And that's where God talked to him too about going and speaking with Pharaoh. And Moses tried to back out of it. He said, I can't speak well. You have to send somebody else. So God brought Moses' brother from long ago, Aaron, in to help him. So the two of them were going to talk to the Pharaoh. And each time that Moses went to speak to Pharaoh and told him to let his people go, God, sent a plague. And then the Pharaoh would go, oh, well, yeah, okay, I'll let you go. And then when Moses went back to him, okay, you're letting my people go. And Pharaoh would go, no. And so God would send another plague. And it took until the last plague of the death of the oldest son in the household for the Pharaoh to finally let Moses and the families go. And it wasn't just like 100 people. It was thousands and thousands and thousands of people that Moses let out of Egypt that night after the angel of death had passed over the houses. And if you'll remember, all of those people, all of the Israelites were saved because they put the blood of the lamb over the door. And when the angel of death saw that, the angel of death passed over those houses and then went to the one that didn't have the blood and killed the firstborn son there. So Pharaoh let him go. Now, yes, Pharaoh let him go, but then he had second thoughts again as they got toward the Red Sea, and he went after them to try and kill them or bring them back. And God provided again with them, and we'll continue that story next week. Moses, though he wasn't the likely person to go before Pharaoh, he obeyed God and he did what God asked him to do. Even though he asked for extra help, he still did what God asked him to do. And he was very brave in that because Pharaoh was the ultimate authority in this time. And, at any moment he would kill someone. But he got the Israelites out of Egypt and headed back toward the promised land and back toward freedom. So, again, hope to see you next week. Hope to see you on the 28th for our tabletop trick-or-treat. Glad y'all are back at school. Hope that's going well. Y'all have a good week. Blessings to you all.